Uh-huh.
That's great. You are good to go.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's session of the Oxford, Ohio Board of Zoning Appeals. This meeting is held virtually under authority of Ohio House Bill 404, which replaced Ohio House Bill 197, authorizing virtual meetings. For our board members and attendees, 404 extends the time that we can do virtual meetings until July 1, 2021. Having gotten that out of the way and calling the meeting to order, I need approval of the minutes of the October 19, 2020 minutes. Board members, is there a motion to approve? Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions first? Sorry about that. Roger, you still want to move to approve?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any opposition? Without opposition, the minutes are approved. We have one case to hear tonight. It is BZA 2020-11 with the property address of 216 West High Street, seeking 3 variances to Oxford Code 1143.05C, covering minimum lot width, maximum lot coverage, and maximum front yard coverage for the addition of a second dwelling unit. Board members, is there a motion to enter into adjudication?
I so move.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, ma'am. Any opposition? Without opposition, we're in adjudication. Zach, you're going to present for the city, is that right? Please read. Okay. State your name for the record and your job title.
Zachary Moore, planner for the city of Oxford.
And please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in matters before this board?
I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and share my slides with everyone. So this is case BZA-2020-11, 216 West High, and there are 3 variances that are requested to lot width, maximum lot coverage, and maximum front yard coverage. The applicant is Scott Webb Architect, who is with us tonight. The property owner is Adele Dake, MPR4 LLC. And the current zoning classification for the property is R2MS, single and 2 family mile square residential. The current use on the property is a single family dwelling. And to outline the section of the code, this variance request pertains to, all 3 requests come out of the same section. It's basically a table that pertains to this section number. It's 1143.05C. And again, that's for the minimum lot width, maximum lot coverage, and maximum front yard coverage. And here is a location map showing you an aerial imagery of the existing house. There used to be an accessory structure back here in the northeastern corner that has since been demolished. There's a concrete pad back there. The lot area totals a little over 8,000 square feet, and the existing lot width is 54.45 feet. And that's along West High Street here. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of alley parking toward the back. And as you may have seen from the site plan included in your packet, there's a proposal to basically add on to this alley parking area by providing the sufficient number of parking spaces off of the alleys here in the back. Here's a look at the zoning classifications. So the R2MS is shown in yellow, and the residential office zone is shown in pink. That's a mixed use zone that allows for mostly residential use, but then some limited forms of commercial use, primarily office related uses. And just to get you acquainted with some of the surrounding land uses. So as I mentioned, the subject property is single family. To the west and to the east of the property, those are 2 3-family dwellings. To the north is a single family dwelling. And then to the, if you go to the very corner here of Elm and High, that is single family. And then off to the east here, this longer building here, that is also a 3-family dwelling. So just getting you acquainted with the surrounding environment. And then here's a good bird's eye view looking west. So of course, the red X here noting that that structure no longer exists back there. The only one that exists on the property today, of course, is the main house there at 216 West High. And the proposal is to put in a second unit, attached unit in the back of the lot. And then I'm going to flip to the next slide so then you can get another view looking to the north. And this shows you the surrounding addresses and the street names. So we can refer back to this as may be needed tonight. And then, of course, the Community Arts Center is there to the south as well. Okay, and then here's some site photos showing you the existing home. Here's where that accessory structure used to be located. So you can see the concrete pad that's there. There's a pretty significantly sized tree that's over in the northwestern corner of the lot. The latest site plan actually has been revised to better help preserve that tree and not have pavement coming a little too close to that trunk. So we appreciate that, of course. Okay, so on to the relevant zoning provisions. So this is out of section 1143.05C pertaining to R2MS. It outlines the lot requirements as well as the coverage requirements. So just to show what particular standards are at play with this particular request. So the minimum lot width in the R2MS, you have to have at least 75 feet of width in order to establish a new two-family use. And then in terms of the coverage, the maximum total for the entire lot is 45%. And then the maximum total for a front yard is 5% per the code. And to show you what is being requested, so the existing lot width is 54.45 feet. Obviously the lot already exists in its configuration. So the request is essentially to put a second dwelling unit on a lot that is already deficient in terms of meeting that minimum width. In terms of the total lot coverage, there's not too much of an increase there. And this one had kind of a back and forth between myself and the applicant in terms of working out various code requirements. And the original plan was actually designed to not exceed this limit, but by nature of having to comply with other requirements, it pushed it slightly above that 45%. But nevertheless, we're recognizing it as an increase and something to be acknowledged in the form of a variance request. With the front yard coverage, there's a little bit more going on with that one than what it maybe is presented as here in terms of going from 5%. The requested percentage amount is 17.49%. And I'll get into that in a later slide and better explain what's going on there. So here's the submitted site plan from Scott Webb and showing you the existing lot width at 54.45. The minimum lot width is represented here to scale, that's 75 feet. So 72.6% of the required width is already provided by nature of the existing lot configuration. Okay, and then here's the fun stuff, right? This is the total lot coverage. So you can see that we're considering the entire lot area, which is outlined in red here, and that is 8,093 square feet. The new addition itself, so part of the addition is actually occupying presently covered ground. But if you consider the outline of the addition, that is 844 square feet. There will be a little bit of square footage that is going to need to be removed to meet the parking setback requirement of 3 feet from lot lines. So this dashed area here is actually existing covered area that would have to be taken out and excavated. Then if you tally up all the existing coverage, which is going to remain, that totals a little over 2,300 square feet. And then you add in the new coverage in orange, which is 1,382 square feet. And that results in a total coverage of 3,689 square feet. And you divide that by the total lot size, and that results in the total percentage of 45.58%, which again is just slightly above the maximum of 45% by that 0.58%. Looking to the front yard coverage, So for an existing house that does not conform to the setback requirement, we would actually measure the front yard to the front facade of the existing house. And that's exactly what we've done here. So you can see where Mr. Webb has noted the normal setback requirement of 20 feet. But in this particular scenario, we measure it to the existing front facade of the home, which I believe per the report is around 16 or so feet away from the front lot line. But we measure the area within that distance. That comes out to 886 square feet. Then we tally up the existing coverage. That is 114 square feet, and they're looking to add 41 square feet of additional hard surface path. So this is the walkway that leads around the existing porch and then travels back to the new unit to hook up with the new entrance to that unit. And that was something that wasn't originally provided on the very first site plan that was shared, but that was one of the code issues that we worked out with the applicant to make sure that they were meeting the principal entrance provision, which is in chapter 1141, which requires principal entrances to be upon the street. And the way staff has interpreted that in the past is that it applies to all uses within the building. So in this particular case, going from single family to two family, we want to make sure that the connection is made, that it's discernible from the street as well as accessible from the street through the private property itself. And so that's the reason why you see the new sidewalk that links up with the existing patio that's there in the back. But if you tally up the square footages, 114 plus 41, that equals 155. And thus the proposed coverage amount is 17.49%. They are basically grandfathered in with their existing blue area. That is, I believe per the report, that's around 12%. So if you look at it that way, going from the existing grandfathered coverage to the proposed coverage, it's not a whole lot. It's around, I think, 4.6%. If you compare it to the quote unquote zoning code standard of 5%, it's a little bit greater, of course. Okay, and then this is the submitted rendering showing, I would say, a very much complementary, design and construction in comparison to the existing home. And okay, and then I'm going to turn to the decision criteria now. I'll just go over those. But just to mention first, so in accordance with section 1139.02 C1, the burden of proof is upon the applicant to present reliable and substantial evidence that supports the request for variance. Furthermore, per section 1139.02 C2, the BZA must find that practical difficulties exist that would render strict application of the code unreasonable. And in determining whether such difficulties exist, which are sufficient to warrant this variance request, the board shall use these 8 decision criteria. So I will begin with criterion A, which is whether the property in question will yield reasonable return or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. Staff finds that this criterion does not support the request. The property is currently developed as a single family dwelling and has been utilized for many years as a rental, which we find to be sufficient evidence to demonstrate that there is beneficial use without the variance, as is acknowledged in the applicant's letter. The applicant further states that this property is located in an area that is targeted by the Planning Commission for further density. I wasn't quite sure what that statement was referring to, but just to clarify, that there was a recent action in 2017 that upzoned portions of the Mile Square. This property in this area of town was not included in that upzoning, so just wanted to make sure that that was clear. The property has been zoned R2MS since the 2003 code rewrite, and that was verified by looking up one of the older zoning maps that's available in our database. So those are the reasons why we find that criterion A does not lend support toward granting the variance. Criterion B, whether the variance is substantial, we find this criterion does not support the request. The applicant is asking for a 0.58% increase in the lot coverage and 4.6% from the grandfathered front yard coverage. These two requests we actually don't find to be substantial. However, in consideration of the lot width adjustment requests, that is a 27.4% reduction from the standard. So we find this to be substantial. This is based on an analysis of all parcels that are falling within the R2MS zoned area along West High, West Church, North Locust, and North Elm. And Appendix A has that table. I also have a map in my presentation that I'm happy to share if needed. So the subject property is one of 7 in the area with a lot width that's conforming to an existing single family use, but non-conforming for a potential 2-family. And 4 of those have greater widths than the subject property. We also found that 9 properties in the area currently support 2-family uses, of which 6 are non-conforming with respect to lot width. The average lot width for the 9 existing 2-family lots is 62.61 feet, which is greater than the lot width for this subject property. In addition, there are 3 single-family properties in the area that already have sufficient lot width to accommodate a conversion to a 2-family use without needing a variance. And just to clarify, and I appreciate some of the materials that the applicant has put together, I was able to get kind of a preview of those. And what the applicant did identify is that some of these single-family uses are indeed lodging houses that have occupancies greater than a normal single-family use, which would normally have a maximum of 4 occupants. So just to keep in mind that when the table says existing land use, it's considering the number of units within the structure, not necessarily the occupancy and how that might have an effect on the non-conforming status of the use. So just something to keep in mind there. Appreciate the thoroughness from the applicant on that. Criterion C, whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. We find that this actually supports the variance. So if you look again to the same exact analysis in Appendix A, the table, if you look at this R2MS zone as a whole, it consists of 15 single family, which again, some of those are lodging houses technically, 9 2-family, 5 3-family, 1 4-family, and 1 multifamily building that contains 14 units. So there's quite a mix within this R2MS area. So it can be found that the area supports a mix of dwelling unit types. The subject property does adjoin, as I pointed out, it adjoins 3-family dwellings immediately to the east and west along West High Street. The submitted rendering shows an addition that appears complementary to the existing principal building and to the overall historic and traditional character of the area. So these are the reasons why we find C to actually support the request. Criterion D, whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services such as water, sewer, and garbage. So the community development staff, we would advise the BZA to rely upon comments from the fire chief in consideration of this criterion. And of course, Chief Deathridge has joined us tonight to speak to those comments. We did not receive any comments from other departments. So given that this criterion encapsulates a lot of different city services and we don't have comments on every single one of those, we just simply rated this as kind of a toss-up category. We use the term mixed evidence in application to criterion D. Criterion E is whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. We find that given the evidence shown up to this point, that it does not lend support toward the variance request. The 75-foot minimum lot width for two family has been a part of R2MS since its inception in 2003. There haven't been any recent changes in that policy in terms of the lot width itself. According to the Butler County Auditor's ownership history, it does appear that the property has been in the present owner's hands since June of 2003. But the degree of commentary, at least at this point, does not speak to the lack of knowledge during this time frame or the pursuit of a two-family use upon initially acquiring the property. Criterion F, whether the property owner's predicament feasibly can be obviated through some method other than a variance. We rate this one also as a mixed evidence category. So the front yard coverage requests could be mitigated and actually might even be rendered moot if you were to install steps down from the back side of the front porch. You may actually avoid the need to install a new walkway in the front entirely and then squeeze it through what is actually quite a narrow passageway between the porch and the alley. If this was pavement that was devoted to a parking space, it wouldn't meet the setback requirement, but because we don't have setback requirements for private walkways, there's no setback that we would apply. I mean, just considering the setback aspect alone, like technically it can be right along the property line and there's not a problem with that in terms of the zoning code itself. With regard to the lot width, the only way to establish a two-family use is through the granting of a variance. But given the evidence under criterion A, it might be arguable whether this would be considered a predicament with respect to the criterion A evidence. So overall, it's kind of a mixed bag with this one. We rate it as mixed evidence. Criterion G, whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting the variance. We find that this one does not support the variance. The original spirit of the larger lot area and width requirements appears to have been to limit increase in density as much as possible. And by having these larger width requirements for two family, the spirit of this provision appears to limit more intense uses to larger and wider spaces. Of course, it's a large enough lot. It meets the lot area requirement of 7,500 square feet. But of course, the problem is the lot width. And then given the principal entrance provision, and I do appreciate the back and forth with the applicant to make sure that we're fulfilling the spirit of that provision. But I think that in and of itself kind of demonstrates in a way, it's difficult to meet, sort of the spirit of having the entrance upon the street. And to me, that kind of helps contribute to the argument that, really this lot isn't wide enough to accommodate, two uses sort of side by side, or at least, having a side by side style of appearance from the street. Furthermore, the area of town, as I mentioned, is untouched by the 2017 rezoning action. And that particular action sought to densify the areas that were closest to campus. And as such, should continue. Well, we would say because this is untouched by that action, we should really be operating under the prior zoning parameters that were established circa 2003. So based on the analysis of the existing uses and lot widths in the immediate area, we are of the opinion that the subject property is not in a comfortable position to warrant the flexibility that's been requested for a two-family upgrade. So for these reasons, we believe the spirit and intent of the lot width requirement specifically would not be upheld if the variance were granted. And then there's an additional criterion H, which is any other relevant factor. So the BZA, as always, may rely upon additional factors or evidence that are contributed by the applicant. And that concludes my report. Actually, I may just mention a couple of things. I've got a couple of slides here at the end. So this is a 2017 upzoning map that shows the areas that were upzoned to increase density close to campus. So campus is over here, kind of the wider areas with less parcelization. And then the hashed areas are delineating the upzoned portions of the mile square, and then this red rectangle is showing you where the subject property is located in relationship to those areas. And then here's a look at the current zoning classification. So per the Appendix A analysis, this is showing you there's a black dashed line. This shows you the properties that are contained within that analysis. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Zach, as always, very well done. We appreciate your thoroughness. Board members, anybody have any questions for Zach? Ms. Romanier?
Is there a relevant difference between an addition and a separate house? Like, is there a definition of an addition? This is described as an addition. So my question is, what's an addition versus a separate unit or something?
Zach, do you want to take that or you want me to?
It's up to you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take it if you would like me to.
Go ahead.
Okay. So a two-family use per the code is attached. So in order to create a two-family, it has to be an addition. When you have a separate unit that's not attached, it becomes its own standalone principal building, and that's not allowed per the code.
Is there a definition of attached? Like, I'm thinking of that goofy building on College Avenue that has like a walkway that connects the attached. Like, how do we know what the attachedness is of this property? There's a little bitty thing there, and maybe Scott will talk about that, but does something have to exist for it to be formally attached?
So it's funny you bring this up. So we have text amendments that are moving through the pipeline right now that were just recently recommended by Planning Commission. And it's all about helping to clarify the addition attachment aspect. So presently we don't really have, much guidance per the code. We just simply know that it's got to be its own standalone building. It can't be two separate buildings. So in terms of, drawing the line somewhere, we are hoping to help clarify that. The provision that we're proposing, again, it's not on the books right now because it still has to be approved by council, but we're proposing a minimum of 8 feet of attachment between enclosed spaces of the two units. So areas that are customarily heated and cooled would have to have some adjacency of at least 8 feet between them. But that's not a code requirement presently, but it is a code requirement to say that there has to be, some attachment between the two units in order for it to be considered one building. So hopefully that helps clarify things a little bit.
Thank you, Zach. Anybody else? Okay. Zach, thanks again. Scott Webb, you're going to present for the applicant.
I am.
Please state your name and title for the record.
Scott Webb.
Wait, Dan
Architect.
has something to say. Did you?
I'm sorry.
Zach, could I see that graph again where you showed the width of the lot? It's allowed, and then
Yeah, I can pull it up.
yeah, okay. So the purple line, the 75 feet.
That's the minimum. Yep.
That would go in, if they were to have 75 feet, that would go into the next property, past the alley and into the next property to be within code without a variance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Dan, sorry if I cut you off. It wasn't intentional.
No, I was muted and I didn't know it.
Okay.
My fault.
Now, Scott, can you state your name and job title for the record, please?
Scott Webb. I'm an architect representing the applicant here this evening.
Thank you. And would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in matters before this board?
I do.
Please proceed.
All right. If someone will put my presentation on the screen, thank you. Okay. Well, as usual, Zach has done a very thorough job in his review here, and the this is just kind of my introduction that, as Zach pointed out, all of these really come from the same code section, the developmental regulations and the R2MS. We can go on to the next slide. So, yes, we understand that we're asking for a variance here tonight. We don't have the lot width that's required. That's why we're here. But we do feel that the variance meets the spirit and intent of the zoning code, allowing a two-family structure in a two-family district. In fact, this is one of the largest lots in this R2 district that's not occupied by an apartment building, perhaps. And I thought I would take a minute to clarify this question about the 2017 changes to the zoning code. What Planning Commission, where they started in that was, as we all know, kind of a reaction to what was happening on the south of town. They wisely came up with the analogy that we can't just keep stepping on the balloon and think it's not going to pop up somewhere else. So planning decided to plan and got proactive and tried to decide and figure out where students live and where they want to live, and then create new regulations that would encourage that. Keeping in mind that we've always had the desire for infill over sprawl in all cases. So Planning Commission found out a couple things during that investigation. One of which is that the lot sizes that we created in the 2003 revision of the zoning code simply do not reflect the lot sizes that are in the districts. When Planning Commission and City Council in 2017 took on this, they corrected that for the R3MS portion of the code. If we look back on Zach's map, where they upzoned to R3MS and also changed the regulations for R3MS in general, based on the fact that, sure enough, as I've been saying for years, the lot sizes in the zoning code have little or nothing to do with the lot sizes in the district for which it was applied. So the consultant pointed that out to them. They decided to proceed, as you know, with the changes to the R3MS, but decided not to correct the obvious error that still exists in the mile square in the R1MS and the R2MS. So my point being that, to Zach's point, this was not a particular area that was upzoned, but it was an area where Planning Commission discovered that there's lots and lots of nonconformities. This is where we want students to live. Students want to live adjacent to uptown and adjacent to campus. We prefer infill over sprawl, so they tried to make some steps to encourage that. So all that being said, we believe that the variance is not substantial because, in fact, the lot in question is one of the largest in this district. It exceeds the minimum lot size requirement, and the lot width is actually reflective of this entire neighborhood. If we can go on to the next slide. So I took Zach's analysis here and felt like, for the time spent evaluating 31 properties, I think he missed some obvious conclusions here. One of which he acknowledged that, in fact, what we're calling single family houses have occupancies anywhere from 7 to 12. We have 8 non-conforming uses that staff found without even considering these 5 additional lodging houses. In addition to that, we have non-conforming 2 families. We have 5 3-families. We have a 4-family. We have lodging houses and 18 out of 31 non-conforming lot widths in this district. In Zach's analysis here, he said that there were the lots in the green, so to speak. Well, let's start with the lots in the light yellow, the ones that I've circled in red, that those in fact are 2 lots that meet both the width and area requirements, 2 of the 31 in this district. Zach mentioned 311 West Church, the next yellow one down. That one is not, in fact, conforming because it does not have the lot area. In fact, it has about the same percentage of lot area as I'm asking for in lot width. And so really the only one in this district that is not either currently non-conforming and performing at a pretty high level in terms of occupancy Really 321 West Church is the only property that actually has the width and the area to put another two-family in this two-family district. So again, this goes to the decision standard that the character of the neighborhood is unaffected here by this proposed addition. So next slide, please. So I think an important point here, I mean, the focus here this evening, Zach has been talking a little bit about density and notion of density being somehow controlled by lot width. Lot width does not exist in a vacuum. Lot width and area actually go hand in hand in controlling density. And when you have an excess of area and a deficiency in width, that makes it a perfect predicament. That's a practical difficulty. That is the reason for the variance. You know, we're excess in one dimension and smaller in another. That's why we're here for the variance. So lot area absolutely determines density in the neighborhood. And when this was zoned R2, it was anticipating there would be some two families here. Lot area, as I said, controls the density. Lot width has been described by staff in the past, and I think is evidenced by what we're seeing here. Lot width is to make sure that there's some rhythm on the street, that the buildings, you know, are not too wide perhaps, or wide enough that we maintain clear setbacks in between the properties when they're adjacent to one another. You can see in this case, this is a very narrow existing house on a narrower lot. And even though we're asking for a width variance, you can see we're exceeding the side yard setbacks on the west side twofold. We're more than 14 feet off the property line when 7 feet is the minimum. And we're at about 12 feet on the east side. So yes, even though the lot width is less than is prescribed by the zoning code, the density can be accommodated by the lot area, the other standard in this particular code section. And the width has been respected, the side yard setbacks exceeded in order to make sure that we're protecting the neighbors to the greatest degree possible, you know, even more so than, I mean, we could build closer to this property line if we were doing an addition to the main house for the main house. So, I mean, care has been taken here to design something with a small footprint that exceeds all these other setback requirements. So again, in that regard, we feel that the variance is not substantial. The things that width control, the rhythm of the facades, the rhythm of the street front is unaffected by this addition, and the area by our code is large enough to accommodate a two-family structure on this site. So we feel that the variance is not substantial, again, that the neighborhood is not affected. And the lot width deficiency in this particular case is mitigated by the design and the location of the proposed addition. So we can go to the next slide, please. So it comes down to lot coverage. And so lot coverage in this particular case, as Zach had sort of pointed out, we're, you know, just over 0.5% over it. To Zach's point, if we eliminated that extra little piece of sidewalk and actually had the residents of this unit come up the existing front walk, go up a few steps onto the porch, go down a few steps off the porch onto a sidewalk, I could have eliminated perhaps both of these. Seems awkward to me that you got to walk up on someone's porch, up the steps, down the steps. You know, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they'll realistically walk the alley instead. I don't think the front neighbors want people traversing their porch night and day. So we simply went around it in order to make this kind of happen. The 5% lot coverage restriction for the front yard, I think, you know, you've seen enough of these, and staff has actually administratively approved some of these, that it's a standard that just simply is not able to be met. In some cases, even with one sidewalk to the front, you can't meet this standard. One of the text amendments, I believe, that is making its way through, I think from some information I got from Zach, is that they're going to look at the front yard lot coverage thing for that reason, that it's just simply not a good standard. The 5% is hard to meet regardless. So nonetheless, you know, We think that's a very minor variance in this particular case. We feel that the variance at hand here really has to do with the lot width. I mean, I could literally make all my sidewalks 6 inches narrower and probably clip this 5% off of here. I could take some of that existing concrete patio out and make that happen. So if lot coverage is a problem for the board, and I would like you to consider these variances separately. If lot coverage is a problem for the board, I'd be happy to look at another method by which we could meet the rest of the zoning requirements and that one as well. To that point, we're providing 2 units here, parking as required, sidewalks as required, nice outdoor space, and we're just barely going over the lot coverage. So, we feel that the lot is certainly large enough to accommodate this addition and meet all of the rest of the provisions of the zoning code, providing the parking and everything else. So again, we feel it's not substantial and neighborhood is unaffected. And next slide, please. So the proposed addition provides a separate entrance facing the street. The addition, if you actually want to flip back one slide, I can address Ms. Ruminier's point. The text amendment that is apparently making its way through the city council requires an 8-foot connection. You can see here where I'm connecting, it's actually at 13 feet. The addition is designed to be complementary in terms of footprint and scale and everything. So back to my next slide, please. And so there we sort of see it, how it is. To me, this entrance is more than clear from the street, from the alley. I think anyone that would walk down there, you can see all the way to the back of the next house on Church Street. So I think it's not going to be hard to find this address by any stretch. And I'd also like to point out that in the midst of planning commissions and city council's 2017 revisions, when they're looking for density, they specifically created means by which we can add to the back of properties. I was recently at planning commission and city council for a conditional use for an accessory dwelling unit in the back of the property. Part of what planning commission recognized was there's a lot of land back there buried in these alleys. It's being unused. It's being randomly parked on and filled with trash. Why not use some of that space back there, put the students in the mile square so they don't spread out into our neighborhoods or further south of town. That being said, planning commission specifically recognized there's a lot of vacant land behind these houses, wrote the zoning code to encourage development back there, and even wrote other provisions that if you don't have the room to put an addition on, maybe you could do an accessory unit instead. So with all due respect to the fire chief, I think the problem here is not really with this particular project so much as it is with what planning commission has done by encouraging people to add on to these houses, and they're adding onto the back. That's where the land is. So, this is one of many. Some we've seen before. Some I'm sure you'll see as as people continue to reinvest in their properties in the mile square. So also, with all due respect to the fire chief, suggesting this is a hard site on which to fight a fire, I take some issue with that. You have public right-of-ways on 3 sides of this property. We're allowed to have a 7-foot side yard setback on the 4th. I've actually doubled that. Fire lanes that we put in front of commercial buildings aren't really much bigger than what you've got here. So of any of these potential additions that could be built in the rear of a building, this one seems to be the most accessible from a fire and service standpoint as anyone you can imagine. There's not going to be very many of these are going to be on the corner of the alley, and provide public way on 3 sides of a piece of property. That's not the norm. That's a rarity in the mile square to have a public right of way on 3 sides. So that being said, again, with all due respect to the fire chief, I feel like you can fight a fire in this because you can get to it better than the house next door as a perfect example, even with this addition. So the delivery of governmental services we feel is unaffected. Utilities are available. The notion of the comprehensive plan favoring infill is specifically for that reason, because utilities are already there. So we feel that there's lots of reasons to consider this. And then next slide, please. So my version of the decision standards looks a little bit different than Zach's. Yes, we acknowledge there's an existing single family home on the site. No question about that. We believe the variances are not substantial because they're reflective of the existing neighborhood, and the addition and everything has been designed to mitigate the potential downfalls. And even though the width is narrower, the side yard setbacks are double what is required. We feel like the essential character would not be affected. I think Zach pointed out, and I have too, with a variety of things that are in this particular neighborhood, from multifamily to lodging houses to 3 families, 4 families, 2 families, a little bit everything. Again, utilities are available, and I just believe that the fire department's concerns are about the zoning code and maybe not so much this particular proposal. I mean, the zoning code is encouraging and making opportunities for people to develop behind other properties. That's what this is doing. When a person has to come to Board of Zoning Appeals, we may have an opinion from the fire chief about this. If I wasn't at Board of Zoning Appeals, we would be building back there without an opinion from the fire chief and building by right. So, I think we have to keep a little bit of fairness in mind here. If I were asking for a lot width variance and the fire chief was saying, I don't want you to get the lot width variance because I can't get past the house, that's a little different than saying I don't like to fight fires behind other houses, again, when we have public right-of-ways on 3 sides. Obviously, the lot width can't be changed with regard to our predicament being feasibly obviated through some other method. And lastly, we feel that substantial justice would be done by allowing a 2-family structure in one of the largest lots in a 2-family district. And it reflects Planning Commission and City Council's decision to allow higher density in the mile square, infill over sprawl. And further, it reflects Planning Commission's discovery that the lot requirements in this section and in all sections of the mile square simply did not match up with those prescribed in the zoning code. So be happy to answer any questions and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Scott. Also very thorough. Board members, any questions for Scott? Okay, without any questions, I'm going to say that your lot coverage and front yard are obviously not a concern to our board members, but I appreciate your willingness to address those if necessary. So if we don't have any questions for Scott, Chief Dethridge, would you like to testify in this case?
I can if you'd like. Oh, hold on just a second.
Sure.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Please state your name and job title for the record, please.
John Dethridge, and I'm the fire chief.
And raise your right hand for me. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in matters before this board?
I do.
Please proceed.
Some of the issues that Mr. Webb brought up that I had mentioned in the review definitely look a little different from my eyes than they do from his. Most of the things, most of the access things, yeah, there's public way on 3 sides of the building. One of those is in the rear, that with the parking in that alley and stuff and college kids parking cars, chances are you're not going to have very good access back there, if any at all. And the, let's see, the alley to the east of the building also has overhead wires in it. So the chances of being able to operate in that alley are slim to none. If there's any kind of extensive fire, you definitely can't park a piece of apparatus there because you're in the collapse zone of the building. Those are probably my biggest concerns. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't burn down a city block when one of these old houses with a old electrical system in it catches fire. And the more houses we pack in like this one, That's just a bigger chance of having one of those catastrophes where we lose 2, 3, 4 houses at one time. I don't want to be on the news explaining that. But yeah, other than that, a lot of the stuff's the same. There are some issues with getting around to the west side of it. The property line over there is overgrown and stuff. I don't think we could access any of it from over there. That's kind of where we're at with it.
Okay. Board members, anybody have any questions for the chief?
I guess I just want to point out, I do see these wires. I hadn't noticed them before in the pictures that someone provided. They're in our packet. They're electrical wires that go up the alley, right? Or around the alley.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I believe there's wires in the north-south alley and also the east-west alley, but
Yeah.
hopefully the ones in the east-west alley wouldn't be affected unless it got real bad.
Anybody else? Well, Chief, just for clarification in this, your concern is not with lot width, any of the variances that are being sought here. Your concern is ability to effectively fight a fire and keep your personnel safe. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay. Since no one else is going to testify, no questions, I need a motion to adjourn to our regular session.
So moved.
Thank you, Roger. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, ma'am. We're now back in regular session. Discussion or motion, please, board members.
I have some discussion.
Please go ahead.
I want to talk about that 2017 rezoning, the spirit of it. I was involved partially in it. And the real spirit of that 2017 rezoning that people have been talking about was to push students east towards the university. And actually, I want to clarify that, to push people east. So the issue that Mr. Webb raises about density and lot coverage, this has to do with buildings and lot coverage, but buildings also have to do with people and cars. And the idea is that the concentration of people would be pushed east towards the university, and that the west side of the town would be left open for less development and more other maybe new kind of development. For example, right around 2017, there was what are those things called? A charrette done about Elm Street, about turning what was then the Whistle Stop into a kind of senior housing or other kind of development. So there's this idea that the west side of town would be open for new, different kind of housing, and that we would increase density of people and related activities of people like cars to the east. So that's one of my concerns about this project, is the main issue of density. So I understand the lot coverage. I mean, I actually have more concerns with the minimum lot width because it is a narrow, it ends up being a narrow, and it is I understand that it's a large lot, but it is narrow in other ways. And it's actually narrower than the area. There are 9 properties, including a bunch of non-conforming properties in that area. And according to the city planner, their minimum lot width is 62 feet. And this one is proposed to be 54 feet. So it's lower even than some other non-conforming buildings. And then also my main concern is the maximum front yard coverage. Now this is kind of interesting. I think Zach can talk about this, but there's this 5%, the front yard coverage. The standard rule since 2003 is 5%. People have been frustrated by that, and there does seem to be some movement in planning to increase that to maybe 15%, I've heard. But even at 15%, this proposal has the lot coverage going up to over 17% over anything that would be proposed. So it's still a lot of land over the front yard coverage. And compared to the standard 5%, it's a huge amount. This one, there was some stuff that was grandfathered in, but originally, under the 5% rule, there should be a lot coverage on the front yard of 44 square feet, and this proposal would get it to 155 square feet. So it's 44 square feet to 155. That's from the standard. Now there's this grandfathered thing in, which it's now at 114, but it still goes 114 to 155. So there's just a lot of density on the front yard coverage that concerns me a lot. So again, in terms of density, we talk about buildings, but we're also talking about humans who live in and use those buildings. And the location of this site on the west side of town, across the street from the Oxford Community Arts Center, and that building on Elm Street, for which there's a proposal to redevelop it to become a think tank or a something tank, means there's some effort, and it's been going on for some time, to have the west side of town be a place that would not be jam filled with people, but would have other kinds of structures and activities going on. So that's just a clarification of that the spirit of the 2017 ruling. So this, as Zach said, this building is not in the 2017 ruling for a reason. That 2017 rezoning was everything east of Main Street. They kept west of Main Street clear to not increase density. And the spirit of the 2017 ruling was all that stuff east of Main Street, or a lot of the properties east of Main Street, to encourage developers to do much like this developer is proposing, to increase density, increase housing, increase more people in there. But we're in the wrong side of town for that to happen here. That's it.
Thank you for that input.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate that. Roger Ames.
Mr. Chair, that was in going through all this, the system and the criteria. That was my same concern, since this was specifically not brought into the upzoning for density. I think that's a moot point.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Chris Allison.
Scott mentioned that there are some discussions going on in planning and so on, and which suggests that if they're intending to make these changes, he should wait. The applicant should wait for the changes to come in so that we can properly evaluate their impact on the decision.
Thank you, sir. Any other board members have input? Okay, do I have a motion? I can't make it. Need one of the board members to make a motion.
So I'll do it.
Okay.
In the matter of BZA 2020-11, I make a motion that we deny the variance, all three requests, based on criterias A, B, E, and G. And I would suggest we follow with staff's recommendation on those particular items.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Hazeman. Zach, are you going to do the roll call for us, please?
Yes, I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
Can we just
Can I
clarify?
have-
And just clarification, a yes vote denies the variance.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with Mr. Ames,
Yes.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Hazeman,
Yes.
Ms. Rumanier,
Yes.
Mr. Schnipper.
Yes. 5-0, the variances are denied. Do we have any new business? Zach, anything coming up that we could put under new business?
It's already come up in conversation tonight, but as I mentioned, there are some text amendments that are moving through the pipeline. So definitely keep an eye out for those. Those will be coming to council. I believe January 5th will be the first reading for those. And that touches a number of chapters in our zoning code, touches on parking amendments, district provision updates, just a whole variety of things. And most of it is just general cleanup and clarification items. We're codifying current practices with a few policy changes mixed in. So I would encourage members of the BZA certainly to take a look over those.
Great, thank you, sir. The only thing that I would have put under old business was the extension legal extension of the ability to have virtual meetings. That's been addressed. Any other board members have anything that they'd like to discuss as old business? Nothing. Okay, need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you. Any opposition? We are adjourned. Thank you. Appreciate you all being here this evening.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Happy holidays, everybody. Take care. Be safe.
You
Thanks.
too.
Night.
Thanks, Chris. Good night.
Right.